So we're going to read from Hebrews 12, verses 1 and 2. Jesus, founder and perfecter of our faith. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Amen.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Catherine. Those who I've not had the privilege of meeting yet, my name's John, and together with my wife, Hannah, we got the privilege of leading this community. We'd love to meet with you at the end, and as Nathan and Lucy said, was tea, coffee, and things like that, and you're so welcome here online. So, over the summer, we were fortunate enough to get away as a family, and we spent most of that time in a home together, just resting. And we did, however, we went to a wedding in a different city for a little while, and we stayed in a hotel. This is the first time we ever stayed in a hotel as a family. And one night we ordered room service, which our 4-year-old thought was the most magical thing ever, that you just like picked up a phone and what you wanted just appeared at your door. And he loved it so much so that after the first night we actually had to disconnect the phones from the room. He would pick it up and just say, "Hello, I would like 5 ice creams." And like, "I would like the latest Paw Patrol HQ toy, please." We realized that we had kind of brought the hotel lifestyle home with us, though, when I was serving our son his food for the evening, and he just said, "That's not what I ordered, Daddy." And just to be clear, like, our boy is a wonderful human being, and it was just, he was so excited by the whole endeavor that he's not kind of turned into this like prima donna sort of, he can only now have breakfast on a tray in bed, but he had kind of enjoyed and become part of this hotel lifestyle. And in a hotel, you are a tourist. And in a hotel, you're a consumer and a critic. In a hotel, you are entitled. You expect certain results after you make certain demands. And there is a danger for us in this. It's not just a danger for 4-year-olds. There is a danger for us in our consumeristic world of relentless advertising, constant rating, constant swiping left or right of things we either do or don't like, is that we can start to live like tourists everywhere, not just in hotels. And what's a real danger for us is that we can start to attend church like tourists. We come to get what we want or we think that we need. We bring a kind of entitled mentality into the room. And the problem with that is that we will always end up being disappointed, because when you come to judge and to rate, it will always the reality will always let you down of what you think could be. And so for sometimes we might come in, and I'm guilty of this as well, like, how was the worship today? Did they play the songs that I like? How was the talk? Was it the right length? Was it the right tone? Was the coffee on point? A little bit strong today. We're learning. It's not a surprise that we sometimes approach church or even relationships like this, is because this is the culture and the world that we are bombarded with 24/7. Rate this, have that, consume this, do that. And the real danger for us, if we're really honest with ourselves, is that we can start to take that consumer mindset, not just to church, but towards God himself. We start to take our experience of being a consumer and we approach God as a tourist, wanting entertainment and instant results. You know, there is nothing evil about hotels, and if you work in the hotel industry, bless you. There's nothing evil about being tourists. We were tourists this summer, but we were not created to live in that space long term. Hotels, being a tourist, are not the environment for growing in emotional and spiritual maturity. The environment for that is within a healthy family. You see, in a healthy family, you're not a tourist, you're not a consumer, but you are a contributor, meaning you have a part to play. That's why we encourage you to join a team here, because we think that you actually have something that is worth saying, doing, or giving. You know, in a healthy family, someone does the cooking, someone lays the table, someone does the washing up. And just a word of advice for any couples or housemates in the room at the moment: avoid eye contact with the person that you currently live with, because what you'll probably be communicating is, yeah, that's me, I do all of it. I told you not to look. In a family, you are committed. You're not just a critic. What that means is you see things that are wrong. You even see things that are broken and that could be better or even need renewing and redeeming. But you don't just stop at observing and critiquing. You become part of the solution, working together for the renewal and redemption of that thing or that relationship. Now, each of us, I'm aware, in this room, bring a whole host of emotions to that word family, and a whole host of experiences as well. Some, that's a really positive word and a positive experience, and for others, it brings up brokenness and it brings up painful realities and memories. But as a follower of Jesus, as part of his church, we, each of us, are called into a different kind of family, a new kind of family that is made up of committed relationships within consistent community. You are called to committed relationships within consistent community. We are called to create home through the redemptive powers of Jesus himself. We are called to create home and family not made out of bricks and mortar, but out of the overflow of our loving relationship with our perfect Father in heaven. And so I say that to say that being part of a committed and contributing family is the context for our passage today in Hebrews 12. It starts with this: since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. Sounds pretty cool to be part of a great cloud of witnesses. But what that means is that we are part of a bigger and better story that spans way beyond our lifetime, way beyond what we do here, our impact here, our purpose here on earth. We belong to a family that God himself has fathered and spans the history of time. And you see, when your story becomes part of his story, following the way of Jesus, through adopting Jesus' life as your own, through finding and discovering freedom from sin through his death and the empowering spirit of his resurrected power for life today, well, then you have something worth living for, and then you can find a family that is worth being part of. We are called into a committed family to play our part as we are nurtured, as we are fathered and mothered by God himself into the fullness of life, both individually and together. So we are surrounded by those witnesses, and then it gives us, this writer of the Hebrew talk, it gives us this incredible rallying cry. We are surrounded, and then it says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance. I believe that this has always been true, but I believe in 2021, in October, I think this is more true now than it's ever been. What the church needs is resilient disciples. what the church really needs, therefore what the world and our city really needs, are resilient disciples. Johnny spoke brilliantly a few weeks ago on becoming aware of the kind of cultural environment that we are living in. And he reminded us that the waters we swim in are the waters of individualism and consumerism. What that means is like the cultural forces of our day, they move us in on ourselves to think, what is in this for me? We constantly think that in every situation we attend or encounter, or even relationships that we find starting. What is in this for me? Is it worth my time? Should I really bother? We cave in on ourselves, and what that does is it pushes us to become tourists to meaningful connections and relationships. We're observers, we're bystanders. We take what we want when we want it, and what we think we need when we think we need it. We become tourists to meaningful relationships, and we kind of therefore live on the surface. We present controlled and curated versions of ourselves to a primarily digital world. And so there's got to be something different. There's got to be something more to life than just coasting through, taking what we need and what we perceive to need at times. I believe that if in this world we are going to take seriously the call of Jesus to follow him, it is going to take perseverance. It is going to require a resilience that moves against the cultural grains of instant fixes and self-seeking comfort. You know, as we follow and pursue Jesus in a culture of self-gratification and unbounded desires, it will mean, as the writer of Hebrews says, untangling ourselves from sin. It will mean letting go of the things that hinder, our constant need for comparison, our desire for perfection and control, our digital distractions and our addictive behaviors. But here is some good news. There is a better way to live. To run the race with perseverance. I love Eugene Peterson. I'll come back to you in a moment. An amazing Christian thinker, pastor, and writer. Eugene Peterson's phrase, a long obedience in the same direction. You see, the Christian life, it isn't always meant to be easy. It's not always going to be the most stylish way to live. It won't be the most comfortable way to live. You know, when you go against the grain, you tend to get splinters. But it is also the only way for us to discover true life, true love, true peace, true joy, and true freedom, as we follow the way of Jesus rather than the way of the world. And so in light of that, over the next 6 weeks, we are going to journey through this series that we have called The Long Game, Rhythms for a Lifetime. And before I jump back into our passage today, I want to make a few book recommendations for you. We're going to really get into this for now. And so I tell you what, they're in my bag that's at the back, but believe that I have these. I want to make a few things for you if you're kind of want to take seriously the call to follow Jesus in an environment where that's not always straightforward, an environment where that doesn't always make sense. Here are a few recommendations for you. Firstly, I'd recommend A Long Obedience in the Same Direction I just mentioned. Eugene Peterson, a brilliant writer and author, fantastic book written about 20 years ago. There we go. Here they are. Yay! So this one, Long Obedience in the Same Direction. I'm just going to hold this. Also, The Disciple by Lucy Pepiat. Lucy is the principal of Westminster Theological College and a friend of ours here. A great book around spiritual formation. The Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. These are coming up here. Like a classic of our time around discipleship. The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. It's not on there if you really want to go a little bit deeper. And then if you've not read any of these, I want to encourage you to get your hands on a copy of this, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Really amazing assessment of where we are in our world and our culture, and some really incredible tools that we're going to look at some of over the course of the next 6 weeks, and a few others. So if you don't read any of them, I encourage you to read this. It's also available in audiobook, which is how I tend to read most of my books. And ironically, you can listen to The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry double speed. I also want to encourage you throughout the course of the next 6 weeks, and I'm going to get on to what we're going to talk about in a moment. I want to encourage a culture of learning and leaning in. That's why we've got notebooks for you, but I want to encourage you to bring your own and do something that helps you engage with what is being taught and what is being shared, and as you listen to God for yourself, what you yourself are learning, so you can look back and move forwards. So, back to our passage. The next little half of that sentence, after the need for perseverance and resilience, it says this: to run the race that he has marked out for us. A different way to use that same phrase: to follow the way of Jesus. There are two biblical concepts that I think are extremely useful for those of us who want to recognize and start to resist the currents of culture that drag us away from Jesus and who we truly are, and back in line with him and the heart of God. And I think there are two words that are these: apprentice and pilgrim. So the first word, apprentice, often translated in Bibles as disciple or follower or even learner at times. It says that we are people who spend our lives apprenticed to our master, Jesus. We are always in a growing relationship with Jesus. A disciple is a learner, not in the academic sense of a classroom setting, rather at the work site of a craftsman, learning from, being in the company of, becoming like the master. Eugene Peterson, in A Long Obedience, describes it like this: we do not acquire information about God, but skills in faith. The second word, pilgrim. Think of those of you who are familiar with the Bible. Think of Abraham and Sarah in Genesis 12. Think of Moses and the Israelites in the deserts, or Paul and the early church as he traveled through Turkey, Greece, and Rome. A journey, a pilgrimage. Being a pilgrim tells us that we are people who spend our lives going somewhere. We are going to God. Spend our lives whose path is the path, and the way of getting there is following in the footsteps of Jesus, being so close to him that we're covered in the dust as he kicks up the dirt in the road in front of us. As pilgrims, we realize that our freedom and our purpose is found in the way of Jesus, step after step. Maturity and growth. The path has already been trodden, and now we get to live in it. And I love how the writer of Hebrews described it. It's perseverance for the race in the one that has been marked out for us. This is not just blind faith guesswork, but it's following in the footsteps that we are called along and into. You see, tourists, they come and go. They see the attraction and then they leave. Whereas pilgrims are on a lifelong journey. The joy is both in the journey itself and in the hope of the destination. Pilgrims are in it for the long game. So as disciples on a pilgrimage, we are in the process of both becoming and going, apprenticing and pilgrimage. And that is our secret weapon against the forces of the world that try and tear us away from who we truly are, that we are both being formed and shaped in our becoming, but we are also on a journey in a particular direction as we follow the way of Jesus for the renewal of all things. And so, this actually requires something of you. Jesus has done all the heavy lifting of allowing us to enter into relationship, discover freedom, discover hope and joy through his life and his death and his resurrection. But then there is something that is required of us, a response that is required of us. I believe one of those things, it requires us to be actively engaged in developing new rhythms, forming new habits, creating discipline, shaping new patterns that help us keep close to Jesus as we move through our lives. And I believe one of the best ways that we can do that is by developing a rule of life. Stephen Covey, a business and leadership expert, claims that we can achieve inner peace when he says our schedule is aligned with our values. When our schedule is aligned with our values. And now, although that is not from the Bible, I can totally imagine Jesus sitting on the front row of that particular TED Talk and be like, preach it, brother. That is exactly what I was talking about. You know, like in recent years, there has been a huge move in the business world, inspired by the self-help genre of the bookshop, towards flexi contracts, unlimited holiday working hours, work from home contracts most recently, and a focus on well-being in the workplace. And all of that is absolutely fantastic, but we need something more than flexi hours and self-help. We need something that is far better, far stronger, and far deeper, that actually leads us into the very heart of God himself. And that is what a rule of life enables. This isn't like a 21st century idea for an overworked and stressed society. This is a rhythm developed in monastic communities over the last 1,500 years of people who want to do life well and want to live life well together. And so before you get put off by the word rule, which is also why we didn't call it rule of life, rhythms for long games, so I didn't think anyone would come to church. Let's look at that word specifically, because I know that some of you are like, rules, religion, and commands, and behavior, and boxes. It's not that. Let's look at that word particularly. In Latin, it's regular, which Latin was the language used by the monastic communities at the time. And that word, regular, has a dual meaning. It meant both regular, with an R, something with rhythm and was consistent and kind of kept on going. But it was also used to describe a trellis. Like a trellis that you get when you are growing vines or something used for garden. A trellis is a structure of regular intervals of wood to enable a vine to grow and to flourish. You know, a rule of life is a rhythm of spiritual practices which support and help us as we follow the way of Jesus. It's not a set of rules and regulations designed to be a straitjacket to create you in a certain way and tell you off when you get it wrong. It is just a regular, ongoing, consistent set of rhythms, practices, habits, patterns that help us keep close to Jesus. And it is also a trellis. Just as the trellis is a supporting structure to the vine that leads to life and to growth and to flourishing, it's the same with a rule of life. The rule is there to guide our lives in the direction of growth, in the direction of maturity, and ultimately to display the fruits of the Spirit in you and to the world around you. Think of the famous passage at John 15 where Jesus says, he is the vine and we are the branches. If we abide in him and he abides in us, we will start to bear fruit. And so the trellis is it's like the supporting structure. It's like the scaffolding around that in our lives to enable us to abide in Jesus. Abide simply meaning to spend time with, to be caught up in the presence of God himself, to walk the path that he has laid out for us. Sister Joan Chittister described a rule of life as something that offers a template of what it is to lead an ordinary life extraordinarily well. An ordinary life lived extraordinarily well. Consider for a moment a professional athlete. Let's take Emma Raducanu for an example, who unfortunately lost yesterday. Oh, the dream is over. That was a joke. That's just a critique on BBC Media. It's like, she's 19, it was one game. She rocks up and she wins last month. She wins the US Open, the first ever qualifier to win a major championship in the history of the game. You know, she didn't just pick up the racket just before qualifying and be like, oh yeah, I'll give this a go. Seems relatively easy. You know, her daily routine, I was reading up on this, her daily routine involves 3 to 4 hours of stretching, of running, of weightlifting, of conditioning, before she then does 5 to 6 hours of actual tennis. What she's doing in her regime, in her routine, she is accessing as much power and strength that her body will possibly allow so that she can play to the best of her abilities. And you know, it's the same with the rule of life. When we implement spiritual practices, they enable us to gain access to a better and stronger power than the one that we can create on our own. Dallas Willard, an incredible Christian philosopher of this century, said this: spiritual practices are activities of mind and body purposefully undertaken to bring our personality and our total being into effective cooperation with the divine order. Fruity, lovely language to say, in cooperation, relationship with God. They enable us more and more to live in a power that is, strictly speaking, beyond us, deriving from the spiritual realm itself. So I want to give you an example at this point. For me, my priorities in life are kind of threefold. My priority is my relationship with God, my relationship with my family, and my relationship with my friends. So for me, some of my rule of life looks like the following, and this is in no particular order. This is just jotted down in a notebook. For me, it's regular time throughout the week to read the Bible and to pray and to be still. For me, it's my phone goes on charge in the kitchen from early evening until after breakfast with my family in the morning. I'm home for dinner and bedtime, bath time, and story time pretty much every night because I want to read with my kids and pray with them before they go to sleep. I practice Sabbath every single Saturday and have done for 2 years. I'm going to get into that next week. Hannah and I schedule weekly and every other weekly date nights, and we also go away at least once for one night without the kids, which I find utterly essential. We love our kids, but we also really love going away. I do one annual retreat a year with a couple of other people. That's for a few days. I also take regular retreat days during the day throughout the year. And we also have once a week, weekly meal with some of our closest friends. That's not all of it. I have other things as part of my rule of life, nor is it finished. This is an ever-evolving, changing thing that I do and I come back to and I revisit. And you know, your rule of life, your structure, your trellis will look totally different to mine. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. Your life is different to mine. You have different things, aspects, relationships to your life. And so that is why over the next 6 weeks, I want to spend time each week looking at a different spiritual practice, meaning like a way to be formed and shaped by the presence of God, to align ourselves with Jesus. But all of these practices will be expressed differently by you. There's not one way of doing this. And some you will catch on to more naturally, and others you'll have to work out a little bit more and find a little bit more discipline into. So over the next 6 weeks, I'm going to rapid fire through this. We're going to look at Sabbath, meaning operating out of a place of rest, stillness, connecting with your soul and the heart of God, hospitality, inviting others into your world, fasting, type of prayer, contending for renewal, serving and sharing, speaking and being the good news of Jesus, and then empowered, a prophetic and spirit-filled life day to day. And let me say this, after you've seen a list of some slightly sort of intimidatingly spiritual words up on the screen. This is for everyone. This is for everyone. This is not for the spiritual elite. Just FYI, that does not exist. There is no such thing. This is not for like Christian kenos that really want to get into stuff. This is for everyone. And they are simple, everyday rhythms and practices that you can do every day, every week, in regular intervals in your life. The rule, the practice, the rhythm, they are not the aim. The aim is a life lived in the company of Jesus. The aim is abiding. The aim is a life lived over the long game that leads to the fruits of the Spirit in your life, which is this: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So Hebrews 12, verse 2. That was just verse 1. We're going to get on to verse 2. Fixing your eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. Jesus was busy. He had a full schedule, but he was never rushed. He was never in a hurry. Why? Because he built rest into his schedule. Jesus was interruptible. We see that throughout the Gospels, that he was interrupted by this person and that person. Why was he interruptible? Well, because he built margin into his life. Jesus spoke to people with love and grace because he built space into his life to spend time with other people. Jesus was rooted in the moment and connected to God, to other people, and ultimately to himself. They were not the byproducts of a laid-back personality or the fruits of a pre-Wi-Fi world. They were the fruits of his way of life. Jesus shows us a whole new way to be human. And he invites us to follow him in that way. This is our fixing our eyes. This is our running our race that has been marked out for you and for me. And so as we read this passage, what does it look like to fix our eyes, to run with perseverance, to run the race that was being marked out for us? It creates a fundamental question for us as followers of Jesus. How would Jesus live if he were you? You see, Jesus' life on earth, it was not lived in the 21st century, in the digital and distracted age. And what a disciple asks, therefore, is, if he were me today, how would he live? How would he do my life? How would he be a teacher? How would he be a single mum? How would he go to university? How would he lead my business? You see, Jesus wasn't a husband or a dad, but I am. So how can I be more like Jesus in my marriage and in my fathering? How would Jesus be when he sits at your desk tomorrow morning? How would he conduct himself in the meetings that you're going to go to? How would he talk at the school gates with the other parents? How would he engage with the internet? How would Jesus live if he were you? Fix your eyes on the pioneer and perfecter of faith. You see, Jesus' invitation is to follow him. And that is our invitation into a life that we actually ache for. Into a life that we all long for. And that can only be found by moving through life shoulder to shoulder with Jesus. So let me ask you this one question as we close. Are you ready to choose and to build a trellis for your vine? A schedule, a rhythm, a few practices to create space in your life with Jesus. To make room for love, for joy, for peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, to let those attributes become your default setting. Are you ready to rearrange or arrange your days around the life of Jesus so that the life of Jesus in you becomes your new normal? This is possible for me, and it's possible for you. Let's pray. If you're able, why don't you stand, and we're going to respond in worship and pray for one another in 1 second. But as we kind of commit ourselves to this, I've covered a few different things, and we'll then, over the next 6 weeks, look at one thing at a time and go a little bit deeper into each one. But as we commit ourselves to this, as we commit to forming a pattern for our lives, a shape for our lives, as we grow in our walk with Jesus, whether this is our first step or our millionth step, whether this is the first time you're hearing something about this or you've heard about this before and you're reassessing and revisiting. I want to reread Hebrews 12 to us in a slightly different translation, and I'm going to use this as our prayer for us as a community. So maybe it might help you just kind of have your arms out as a way of just committing this day, your life, this moment to Jesus. You might want to say, just, Jesus, come and do a new work in me. Lord, where I'm stuck, would you break whatever is in front of me? Would you remove any obstacles? Would you help me throw off the sin that so easily entangles and the things that hinder us? The things that hinder me, Lord. I want to fix my eyes on you. So this is our prayer. As for us, we have all of these great witnesses who encircle us like clouds. So we must let go of every wound that has pierced us and the sin that we so easily fall into. Then we will be able to run life's marathon race with passion and determination for the path that has already been marked out before us. We look away from the natural realm and we focus our attention and our expectation onto Jesus, who birthed faith within us and who leads us forward into faith. His example is this, because his heart was focused on the joy of knowing that you would be his. He endured the agony of the cross, conquering its humiliation, and now sits exalted at the right hand of God. Jesus, as we worship you, would you come and would you encounter us in this place? Would you move in us? Would you clear the path beneath our feet and show us what it is to live with you, to walk each step in relationship and connection with you? Move in us, Holy Spirit.